So fantastic. The meeting is being recorded. We've got it. Perfect. So today we're going to start by talking about burnout, and then we're going to move into some more longer term thinking. But the word that comes up when I talk to people about how we've been feeling lately is exhausted, right? Like we're exhausted. We're tired. We're tired of this stuff. And it's been a couple of times now that we've kind of ebbed and flowed to think, oh, okay, maybe things are changing and we're getting out of this mode of functioning. Ooh, but then we've been pulled right back into it. And then, oh, maybe it's changed. No, we're right back into it. So that kind of back and forth has been really disruptive for a lot of us. So let's go ahead and get into our discussion today. Colleen, if we could share your screen with our Reset to Resilient, we'll be ready to go. And you might hear me say, next slide. I don't have a little dinger. So Colleen is going to be my IT ace and proceed to the next slides for us. So let's get into this. Getting back to yourself during difficult times. Really, that's what we're looking for. I want to feel better. I want to feel like I would like to feel. I want to feel happy. I want to enjoy the people I love. So we know that we've gone through quite a bit of loss over the last couple of years. We might have lost loved ones. We might have lost connections. We might have lost parts of our daily routine, and definitely lost the security of knowing what's coming up next, right? Every day is a new basket of issues that we get to tackle and say, hey, what's coming my way and what am I going to do about all of this stuff coming my way? So when we live under these conditions, especially for a long period of time, it can have real consequences for our psyche. And this is called the burden of accumulated adversity. And though these kinds of pandemics affect people differently, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're all escaping without these kinds of stress. So what happens is that typically the more stresses we pile on, the greater the risk of developing psychological problems becomes. And those who study these societal consequences of the pandemics expect that as this stretches on, people's moods are going to kind of continue to worsen. And that's really particularly if we experience more setbacks. So we're kind of already at this base level now, and our base level kind of keeps dipping. And if we experience another setback from that lowered base level, it really can hit us pretty hard. And these moods can manifest as irritability or even some more serious health problems. According to polling, 1 in 3 people is feeling pretty fragile right now. And so we really see this on the news, if you can even bear to watch the news. You know, we heard all about this winter, people behaving terribly in airports. People behaving badly in stores, being uncooperative. So what we want to do today is address what we can do about our situations and learn more about what helps us in particular during tough times, both kind of in this acute phase and then more long range, because we do not want to be the person having a temper tantrum in the airport. We want to do better than that. So today we're going to try and tap into what really makes us our best selves and how do we put our energy into that. So we just kind of discussed on our slide here, we just kind of discussed where we are. Next, we're going to move into talking about how burnout is really an acute phase. Resilience is a longer term skill. Then we'll go into bad stuff happening to all of us. It's not you being punished. It just is. Looking for the good anyway. And then we're going to end with a big question that can help guide our behaviors for ourselves as we move into this next phase of things, to really let us focus in on what is going to benefit us. So let's move on to our next slide, Colleen. This is just something pretty to look at for us. When we talk about the difference between burnout and practicing resiliency skills. because they're really two different things, right? But they get muddied together because they share some common language. Burnout, though, is an acute syndrome associated with chronic stress that goes unmanaged. It's typically caused by outside factors and can't be fully addressed through an individual's efforts. So external stressors are things like work demands, lack of control over one's time or one's resources, unreasonable deadlines, all those things that make you feel kind of tight and pressured, right? That is what developmental strategy that allows you to adapt to life's adversities. And sometimes you're better at it at points in your life than at other points. But it is a learnable, practicable skill set that you can continue to develop. It's not something like, oh, I'm resilient or I'm not. You really can work on developing that standpoint for you to assess the world from. Our goal today is not to increase your productivity. Am I still in? Did you guys lose me? I'm back. You got me now? Okay. So the goal of today is not to increase your productivity. It's not to make you more pleasant around your colleagues, although that would be lovely, right? It's to equip you with some ideas about addressing that burnout so that you can feel better like sooner, and to give you some skills to help you weather some future blows. Resilience is helpful for dealing with burnout, but it has limitations. And we want to be clear from the outset that having resilience doesn't mean that you don't feel distress. It doesn't mean you don't get tired. It doesn't mean you don't get frustrated, especially in these times, right? But it does increase your personal resources. What it doesn't do is address the imbalance in energy demands. It doesn't go to those external forces, right? So when you're experiencing burnout or this higher level of stress, lower level of base functioning, becomes what you can do to kind of survive that time and then move out and into a period where you can thrive. We're going to try to apply protective strategies that will allow us to do better in future situations. And then really think deeply about how we can apply this to our own specific circumstances. All right, so let's go on to our next slide. I have this great artist that I found who does some webcomics. And this artist is called Bamsara, and their work is really powerful and very clear to me. Plus, I just love a sympathetic cat. So, you know, this really spoke to me. Cats are great. So the challenges that we're experiencing aren't new, but this pandemic has kind of accelerated a lot of our feelings. The feeling about a lack of control over our circumstances is really at the heart of burnout. Back to that word, exhausted. We feel tired. We feel like, I wish I didn't have to deal with this. But exhaustion is actually a perfectly normal reaction to stress. And it's not necessarily a sign that anything is wrong. It's our body's way of saying, "Ooh, this is too much." And if we can listen to that, it lets us know we've got to balance these scales a little bit better. Our bodies really weren't meant to be in continuous service. So we need to rest and find ways to renew ourselves so that we can have this capacity to take on the world again. When we're deeply experiencing burnout, that renewal process just doesn't happen. All right, next slide, please, Colleen. All right. So what might be causing our burnout? And if you're sitting at a desk right now or you have something you can jot down, just grab a little piece of scrap paper. And I'd like you to take a moment just to consider a couple of the stressors that you have right now. Colleen and I were talking about how the news has again become kind of a big stressor to find out about this war and how these images really bring us closer to this level of terrible human destruction. So that's like this whole extra layer that has just been added recently. Maybe you're thinking about work, your home life, some other commitments. I'd like you to just jot down maybe 2 or 3 of the things that are weighing heaviest for you right now. What is heavy that you're carrying around? And if you're feeling brave and like you'd like to share, please drop that into the chat. Because hearing what you have going on can make other people feel like not so alone, and that you were also experiencing something that they thought they were struggling on their own with. Maybe caring for a family member might be understaffing. I know that a lot of our agencies have really been affected, our institutions and agencies have really been affected by understaffing and how that balloons everybody else's work out. Maybe it's making dinner every night. Like sometimes that can really get you down. So if anybody's feeling brave, go ahead and drop it into the chat. Let us know what you're calling that. Feeling positions are open. Yes, that is an epic job right now. And it feels like it has to be done quick. And no matter how quick you do it, it kind of wasn't quick enough, right? And then there's people come on and they still need a bunch of care and they need to launch. So good on you. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Disconnection. Thank you, Colleen. We talked about that earlier. Constantly needed at home, wearing too many hats. Amen, sister. We are all wearing a lot of hats. I felt that intensely when I decided I could homeschool my children last year. Like, whoa, I just became a cafeteria worker and a guidance counselor and a teacher, and I'm still mom, and I'm doing my job. How do I do this? I didn't do it well, let me tell you. I did it kind of crummy all the way around, but it was really my best. Thank you all for sharing where those imbalances come from. All right. Expectations from others. And man, sometimes those have just got to roll right on down the line. We got to say, what is important for me? How do I prioritize this? And where do I draw the boundaries? Because I can toughen myself up. I can get better at everything, but the demands sometimes outpace what I am able to do. Have you ever felt like you've been rewarded with a good job that you've done by getting more work? Like, that's such a lovely experience, right? Like, oh, I just did awesome. Oh, you think I can do more? Wait, I did awesome because I could handle what you gave me, and then just barely so. So that is part of that lack of control, and that is part of that imbalance, because you can continue to get more and more awesome, but sometimes that means your demands just ramp up. And that doesn't mean go ahead and do a crummy job so nobody expects much from you. That means be clear about what you can and cannot do. And sometimes that's difficult to figure out. All right, so let's go to our next slide. So when we are feeling maxed out, like you're at the end of your rope, but then your rope catches on fire and you're like, I didn't even know that could happen. How is this possible that things could get worse from here? This is how the burden of accumulated adversity feels. You are at the end of your rope, there's nowhere left to go, and you must go further. So now let's shift into how this actually manifests in our own experience. What does that feel like to you when you are at the end of your rope and the rope catches on fire? What about your experience signals to you that you are cruising for some rough times ahead? For me, it feels like everything moves very quickly. Like time is just accelerated. And before I know it, I have lost 3 hours. I have been working in a frenzy. And the next thing I know, I have really nothing to show for it. So for me, I get really a distinct acceleration in time. Does anybody else have any experiences that you get either a physical manifestation or kind of like a mental feeling. What is it? If you would put it into the chat for me, what is it that feels like you are experiencing? How does that work itself out for you? Tightening of the chest is another one. Enhanced anxiety, absolutely. Like everything is on edge. Headaches, Melissa. Because you're like straining to do life, right? Everything is an effort. Migraines is another thing that commonly comes up. Feels like you're drowning. Breathing, shallow breathing, right? Trouble sleeping. Yes, sleeplessness. Yeah. I have got no trouble in the evening. I'm exhausted. I go to sleep. I'm fine. But if I wake up, it's trouble. I ain't going back to sleep. Not going to happen. So, and a lot of times, lack of self-care. We feel like we don't have the time for ourselves. And we're the first thing to cut from the list, right? That sleeplessness thing and that anxiety thing are linked up. If you find that you wake up from 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning every night and you have a tough time getting back to sleep, you might want to consider if anxiety is playing a role in that for you. A lot of times what we can do is suppress that anxiety all day long, and then we finally relax enough in our sleep cycle, and then guess what? Huge spike in cortisol, huge spike in adrenaline. We wake up and we're wired because that anxiety has finally been able to surface. Even if we can't pinpoint what might be troubling us, it will bubble out when we have let our guard down enough, which you can't stop. You're sleeping. You don't know you're doing that. So think about addressing those aspects of your life that might be increasing that anxiety and fueling that sleeplessness. All right. Very good. Thank you all for sharing that. Let's move into the next slide. Okay. I think this is that self-care reference, Colleen. We neglect our own needs to try and compensate and stave off the guilt that we're not being productive enough, right? We think we're slacking. We think we're slipping. Well, what can I cut? Oh, I can cut me. I'll get removed from my list because these things I owe to others. That thing where you can make pictures and say, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. Well, on the internet, on social media, whatever, that is this picture. I am in this picture and I don't like it. First mom was to look at this, and that is, don't light yourself on fire. Someone else. I think that's really important. Like sometimes we'll do that because we like the duties that we owe to others are greater than the duties that we owe to ourselves. Oh, I have a hard time hearing. Okay. Let me see if I can change any volumes here. Very broken. Oh, Mr. Young, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is anybody else having that difficulty? Yes. Oh, no. Hey, would you like me to try to call back in on another phone line and see if we get a clearer fading in and out once in a while? Okay, I'm going to try to remedy that so we're less distracted, okay? Let me see if I can do that. I don't want to mute the phone. All right, I just found a setting that says noise reduction on my phone. Any better? Yay! All right, great. Moving on. So, don't light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Really important. If you're on fire, you're not at your best. And you would want to be able to come up with a solution with the person you're trying to keep warm that doesn't harm yourself. So as you think about this, when you're approaching burnout, what are the first things that get crossed off your list? What are the first things you feel like you don't have time to engage with? And go ahead and share that with me in the chat if you don't mind. For me, I tend to move so fast that I don't prioritize eating, and then I end up grabbing like a cheese stick. And that's not the best. I'm a health lady. I know better than that, but that's what I end up doing. Handful of nuts. How about for anybody else? Walking the dog. So you just like start letting the dog out and you watch the dog walk instead of going for a walk with the dog. I love that phrase, watch the dog walk. Anybody else drop anything that they enjoy? Colleen and I were talking when we started our conversation. I stopped noticing things. I stopped noticing the birds. I stopped noticing the flowers. Reading in quiet time. Yeah, because it's hard to really settle down when you feel like you're drowning, when you feel like you're underwater. Anybody else drop sleep? Going outside, exercise, talking with friends on the phone. Talking with friends on the phone moves us into our next slide. And Colleen will go on to that. One of the reasons that it gets so easy to withdraw is because we don't feel like we have much to offer. We feel like we've already given out everything to everyone else, and then we start to pull back. And the pandemic that we've just experienced has really increased this withdrawal. And that's like such a strange thing. We have had all these acquaintances, like all these people we saw regularly, even like just in the blue. And what that does is all of those little interactions that we have that go smoothly, that go well, it reinforces to us that the world is not that scary of a place, right? There's some people all over. But what happened when we stopped seeing friendly people all over? What happened when we stopped having these minor connections and made the world feel that much more threatening, right? Another aspect of this is that many of us have a hard time kind of letting on that things aren't okay. We want to be awesome. We want to think, oh, we're handling it all well. We're doing fine. We want people to think we're great. And it makes it hard sometimes to admit when it's not awesome, when it's not great, when you're not well. So what I would like you to think about right now is whether or not you're a person who finds it easy to admit that things aren't going great, or whether you're a person who really has a tough time saying that. And then, do you have a person who you can say that line from the pandemic comedian Bo Burnham, I am not feeling good? Do you have someone you can say that to and that will understand that you're still okay, that you're still the person you are, but that you need help right now? Do you have someone you feel comfortable with? It is a must. It is a must. And let me tell you, jot that person's name down on your paper right now. That is an important person for you to maintain your contacts with. And if you don't have somebody to write down, you go ahead and write down Christina from Commonwealth, Christina with a K. You can email me and I will get you resources, I will make you laugh, and I will help you get back on track. I have access to our employee assistance program, which we'll go into later in our presentation today. I can help hook you up with additional resources that can provide you with that stability that you're looking for to get you back to feeling more like yourself. And I say you can write down my name because I really know what it feels like to have lost that connection. So on to our next slide, Colleen. This is when burnout has taken a turn into something more severe. This is where things have gone pretty badly for a good amount of time. and our brains really start to change. Where your feelings stop being limited to whatever your stressor is and spread out to all areas of your life. When that stress oozes out over everything else, this is a really important recognition, because that means you really need to turn the bus around, and you've got to find maybe some extra help to do so. So this is important. People with burnout don't always have depression, and burnout might increase your risk of developing depression. Burnout and depression can have a lot of overlap. So exhaustion, cynicism, withdrawal, those are parts of both experiences. And it's important to get this diagnosis right and talk to a doctor so that you can make sure you're getting the right kind of help. Because like if you've got hopelessness, low self-esteem, suicidal tendencies, your treatment is going to be really, really different than somebody experiencing kind of a run-of-the-mill burnout. Your 3-day, week-long weekend vacation isn't going to cut it when we're talking about depression. So take yourself seriously. Get help if you need it. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. Again, you will have the employee assistance information by the end of today's session, so you can go and get some professional help. The good news is that we can cover depression and burnout. Remember, burnout is this energy imbalance. Somebody is asking more from you than you can give, and you need a reset. That is burnout. Depression requires help. Don't be afraid to take it. Our EAP is really lovely. It's got so many helpful aspects to it. It's not just for drug and alcohol issues. It is really for any issue that you may be struggling with in your life. I use it. Both of us use it. It's very deeply, deeply helpful. So if you're thinking about that, don't think anymore. Take the action and get the help that you need. All right, on to our next slide. This is one that I'm really going to want on a t-shirt. You don't need to be more productive. You need to feel better. We're going to start there. It's not about what you can produce, because that does not determine your worth. I'm going to say it again, because I think this is one that needs some time to sink in. Productivity does not determine your worth. You are greater than the sum of your parts. So, to address the energy imbalance, this is where calling in help can be effective. Is there a way to problem solve by looking at what your resources are? Is there a way to communicate with the other people in your department to say, we've got to rejigger these priorities so that we're putting our energy where it needs to be, and we're going to let some of this other stuff go for right now? Is there a way that you can partner up with someone else to say, hey, I love doing that aspect of things. This feels like a slog for me. You love doing this thing that I hate. Can we trade? Do we have creative ways to approach the situation? But you know what? When you feel like you're drowning, are you at your most creative? Are you like, oh, you know what I love to do today? Problem solve, right? No, that's a really difficult prospect. So by asking help and pooling resources and getting ideas from other folks, that's where we can have some great sometimes, because people can see creative solutions that might be just blocked for you right now. Start asking for help is visible from the top of the well. Oh no. How am I? Better? Any better? Little bit, Colleen? Can you hear me now? Okay. So sometimes we'll get creative solutions that you can't see because you're at the bottom of the well, and it's dark down there. Get somebody to throw the bucket down to you. That's the way up so that you can see what's coming next. All right. The next slide, the process of things that can help us feel better. So probably more move on to our next slide. Okay. I'm so sorry for having difficulty. All right. We're going to make a list of 3 things that make you feel better when you do them. Your list can start with basic things like eating well, sleeping regularly, limiting your commitments. And then what I'd like you to do is add 3 things to your list that are just for you, that make you feel like the most you. And then if you're ready, you can share them. For me, they are my book club, walking in the woods, and cuddling my kids. Christina, please turn my camera off. That may improve the How's that? You're fine. Thank you, Jessica. Any better with my audio? Yes, great. Hiking long distances. Awesome, Scott. Kindred spirits there. I love taking the whole day for a hike. I don't get to do that very often. Anybody else willing to share what they do that makes them feel awesome? Enjoying pets, painting, yoga and reading fiction, birding. I was going to say, Colleen, you better write birding. Writing fiction. Ooh, interesting, Allison. Dancing and music. I dance every night when I make dinner. Music can really change how we feel, can really change our mood. Hiking, cooking, and sometimes, I like that, Claire. Sometimes when it's a total obligation, it can feel like a drag. But sometimes, or is it sometimes shopping? Sometimes shopping stinks. It's really fun too. Excellent. Anybody else willing to share? Ooh, shopping. Yes. Not online. Exactly. Dancing, painting, hiking. Great. Got it, Claire. So you all, are you doing these things? Is this happening regularly? Maybe so, maybe not, right? These are the things. These are really the things that come off of our list first. Not enough, right? Not enough. Not as much as we would like to. Oh my gosh, right? It's $1 million to take a drive in the country now. So be a little more limited. Music, yoga, kitties. Look, so what I'm seeing about some of these things, though, is that they're easy to get small bites out of. They're easy to throw in all day long. Let's look at Jennifer's idea. Music, we know that that can be worked in multiple points of our day. I just talked about dancing when we're doing dinner time. You can have music on your way home from work. You can have music during your lunch break. We can have music to go to sleep. We can have music to wake up. Yoga, we know that getting up out of our chair every 20 minutes is what keeps us the most healthy. So if we got up and just did one yoga series for 2 minutes and then sat right back down, think about the difference that would make just in feeling like your shoulders were up by your ears. Maybe we could get them to relax down a little bit. And I see everybody shifting in their seats now. Their shoulders. Like, we carry that tension around. So maybe we take these as bites of self-care, because this is really what self-care is. These things are how we feel connected to ourselves and others. And when we participate in these activities, this is what makes us feel like we understand ourselves. The more we can have snacks of these kinds of activities throughout our day, rather than making them a big old to-do, right? That's the whole thing with like exercise. The more of a to-do you make it, the more of a deal it is, the more you have to change clothes, change shoes, make it a thing, the bigger of a load it becomes. Think about all of these activities that you love and feel good. Think about how you can turn them into snacks for yourself of enjoyment, of pleasure, of happiness that you deserve access to in your day. You get to make a roadmap of the things that are important to you. And you've got the start of one right now. All right. I'm so glad you all can hear me a little bit better. Please know if I fall out again, I will keep, we offer, Claire, thank you so much. We offer yoga at the Rec Center on Tuesday and Thursday. Come see us for some self-care. Snacks of joy. Thank you, Colleen. I love it too. I just made it up. So that was an off-the-cuff happiness there for me. All right. So on to our next slide. This says that rest is not a reward. It is a requirement. However you get that rest, the process will take time and it's well spent. Is there anything that you can do that you don't have on your list yet that you think would qualify as a restorative practice? What is something that helps you hit that reset button if you haven't already listed it? The thing you find most relaxing, the thing that makes your body and mind feel like it can replenish itself. Add that to your list if it's not already there. If it's already on your list, you put a little asterisk by it. Oh, stars on a chilly night. Well, I think you're going to get your wish because chilly nights are coming. We're away from the 70-degree days again and back to March weather. So look, let's take a deep and let it out. Look at your list. Look at what you put a star next to or what you added as your deep restorative practice. I want you to do that thing over the course. By Monday, I want you to have done that thing. And I don't want it to feel like, I just added something to my to-do list. That's the opposite of what we want to do, right? I want to hear that approach as being more like, I'm looking forward to doing my thing. I'm looking forward to feeling good about doing my thing. I am looking forward to connecting with myself because I'm awesome at my stuff. We have this kind of new tyranny of self-care. It's like, make sure you sleep 8 hours. Make sure you're getting all of your vegetables. And in addition to that, you need to be healthy socially. I mean, like, we put all these restrictions on ourselves, all these controls on ourselves. But connecting with what actually feeds our soul doesn't feel like work. It is joy. It is what brings us happiness. So, being in charge of you is by far the most important thing you can be doing, because guess what? You are the only person who is tasked with that job. You are the only person in charge of taking care of you. So think about, from this point forward, tending yourself like you are a garden. What is it that you need to grow? What is it that you need to build strong roots? And then what is it that causes you to feel like you are blossoming? Take some time at the end of the session today, maybe, to add some things to your self-care list. How do I feel good? What can I do? And how can I turn these into snacks of joy if I am having a difficult time accessing some of these bigger ideas? All right. So next slide. This is just a takeaway from our burnout session here. And that is that resilience is this internal mindset, but that burnout is an energy imbalance due to external stress. You are not creating that internally. So think about how to take these protective measures to get you through while you rebalance that energy demand. Okay, next slide. Resilience doesn't guarantee you aren't going to burn out. But if we can balance the stressors and use these restorative practices to reset. And restorative practices are those things that are going to address our fatigue mentally, socially, emotionally, not just our physical tiredness, not just this feeling of I am exhausted. Because we know that's like, we know it's a difference between when a kid says I'm tired, like they're sleepy tired. When an adult says they're tired, it means really that they feel weary, that we don't have the energy that we want to do the things that we find important. So get curious about your actions. Get curious about what it feels like that is helping you. And then get curious about what feels like is harming you and how to really address that harm. All right. Our next slide is letting us know that we've got a break coming up. So I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes, refresh your coffee, go take a little quick walk, maybe even put on your favorite jam and boogie a little bit if you would like a little dance break. Whatever it is, go make yourself happy for 5 minutes, and we're going to come back at 10:50 and dig into Lucy Hohn and her amazing research and personal experience with resiliency. So that was the burnout section. Then we're going to dig in deeply on this kind of longer term thinking for resilience coming up next. So I'll see everybody back here at about 10:51 or so. And it looks like maybe to about 10 seconds in would probably get us started. Yep, right about there. All right, so we're going to let this roll. I'm going to put myself on mute, and then when we come back, we'll discuss her findings and talk about how we can really apply those for our sets of thinking that can help us weather what we have coming down the pike, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself now. Hey, Colleen, I might need you to unmute. Colleen's actually the player. There she is.
Had a miscarriage, if you've ever had an abortion or struggled through infertility, please stand up. Finally, if you or anyone you love has had to cope with mental illness, dementia, some form of physical impairment, or cope with suicide, please stand up. Look around you. Adversity doesn't discriminate. If you are alive, you are going to have to, or you've already had to, deal with some tough times. Thank you, everyone. Take a seat. I started studying resilience research a decade ago at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was an amazing time to be there because the professors who trained me had just picked up the contract to train all 1.1 million American soldiers to be as mentally fit as they always have been physically fit. As you can imagine, you don't get a much more skeptical, discerning audience than the American drill sergeants returning from Afghanistan. So for someone like me, whose main quest in life is trying to work out how we take the best of scientific findings out of academia and bring them to people in their everyday lives, it was a pretty inspiring place to be. I finished my studies in America and I returned home here to Christchurch to start my doctoral research. I'd just begun that study when the Christchurch earthquakes hit. So I put my research on hold and I started working with my home community to help them through that terrible post-quake period. I work with all sorts of organizations, from government departments to companies and all sorts of community groups, teaching them the ways of thinking and acting that we know boost resilience. I thought that was my calling, my moment to put all of that research to good use. But sadly, I was wrong. For my own true test came in 2014 on Queen's birthday weekend. We and 2 other families had decided to go down to Lake Ohau and bike the Alps to Ocean. At the last minute, my beautiful 12-year-old daughter, Abby, decided to hop in the car with her best friend, Ella, also 12, and Ella's mum, Sally, a dear, dear friend of mine. On the way down, as they travelled through Rakaia on Thompson's track, a car sped through a stop sign, crashing into them and killing all 3 of them instantly. In the blink of an eye, I find myself flung to the other side of the equation, waking up with a whole new identity. Instead of being the resilience expert, suddenly I'm the grieving mother, waking up not knowing who I am, trying to wrap my head around unthinkable news, my world smashed to smithereens. Suddenly, I'm the one on the end of all this expert advice. And I can tell you, I didn't like what I heard one little bit. In the days after Abby died, we were told we were now prime candidates for family estrangement, that we were likely to get divorced and we were at high risk of mental illness. Wow, I remember thinking, thanks for that. I thought my life was already pretty shit. Leaflets describe the 5 stages of grief: anger, bargaining, denial, depression, acceptance. Victim support arrived at our door and told us that we could expect to write off the next 5 years to grief. I know the leaflets and the resources meant well, but in all of that advice, they left us feeling like victims, totally overwhelmed by the journey ahead and powerless to exert any influence over our grieving whatsoever. I didn't need to be told how bad things were. Believe me, I already knew things were truly terrible. What I needed most was hope. I needed a journey through all that anguish, pain, and longing. Most of all, I wanted to be an active participant in my grief process. So I decided to turn my back on their advice and decided instead to conduct something of a self-experiment. I'd done the research, I had the tools. I wanted to know how useful they would be to me now in the face of such an enormous mountain to climb. Now, I have to confess at this point, I didn't really know any of this was going to work. Parental bereavement is widely acknowledged as the hardest of losses to bear. But I can tell you now, 5 years on, what I already knew from the research, that you can rise up from adversity, that there are strategies that work, that it is utterly possible to make yourself think and act in certain ways that help you navigate tough times. There is a monumental body of research on how to do this stuff. Today, I'm just going to share with you 3 strategies. These are my go-to strategies that I relied upon and saved me in my darkest days. They're 3 strategies that underpin all of my work, and they're pretty readily available to us all. Anyone can learn them. You can learn them right here today. So number 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They know that suffering is part of life. This doesn't mean they actually welcome it in. They're not actually delusional, just that when the tough times come, they seem to know that suffering is part of every human existence. And knowing this stops you from feeling discriminated against when the tough times come. Never once did I find myself thinking, why me? In fact, I remember thinking, why not me? Terrible things happen to you just like they do everybody else. That's your life now, time to sink or swim. The real tragedy is that not enough of us seem to know this any longer. We seem to live in an age where we're entitled to a perfect life, where shiny, happy photos on Instagram are the norm, when actually, as you all demonstrated at the start of my talk, the very opposite is true. Number 2, resilient people are really good at choosing carefully where they select their attention. They have a habit of realistically appraising situations and typically managing to focus on the things that they can change and somehow accept the things that they can't. This is a vital, learnable skill for resilience. As humans, we are really good at noticing threats and weaknesses. We are hardwired for that negative. We're really, really good at noticing them. Negative emotions stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive emotions and experiences seem to bounce off like Teflon. Being wired in this way is actually really good for us and served us well from an evolutionary perspective. So imagine for a moment I'm a cave woman and I'm coming out of my cave in the morning. There's a saber-toothed tiger on one side and a beautiful rainbow on the other. It kind of pays for my survival for me to notice this tiger. The problem is we now live in an era where we are constantly bombarded by threats all day long. And our poor brains treat every single one of those threats as though they were a tiger. Our threat focus, our stress response is permanently dialed up. Resilient people don't diminish the negative, but they also have worked out a way of tuning into the good. One day, when doubts were threatening to overwhelm me, I distinctly remember thinking, no, you do not get to get swallowed up by this. You have to survive. You've got so much to live for. Choose life, not death. Don't lose what you have to what you have lost. In psychology, we call this benefit finding. In my brave new world, it involved trying to find things to be grateful for. At least our wee girl hadn't died of some terrible, long, drawn-out illness. She died suddenly, instantly, sparing us and her that pain. We had a huge amount of social support from family and friends to help us through. And most of all, we still had 2 beautiful boys to live for who needed us now and deserved to have as normal a life as we could possibly give them. Being able to switch the focus of your attention to also include the good has been shown by science to be a really powerful strategy. So in 2005, Marty Seligman and colleagues conducted an experiment, and they asked people, all they asked people to do was think of 3 good things that had happened to them each day. What they found over the 6 months course of this study was that those people showed higher levels of gratitude, higher levels of happiness, and less depression over the course of the 6-month study. When you're going through grief, you might need a reminder, you might need permission to feel grateful. In our kitchen, we've got a bright pink neon poster that reminds us to accept the good. In the American Army, they framed it a little bit differently. They talked to the army about hunting the good stuff. Find the language that works for you, but whatever you do, make an intentional, deliberate, ongoing effort to tune into what's good in your world. Number 3, resilient people ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? This is a question that's used a lot in good therapy. And boy, is it powerful. This was my go-to question in the days after the girls died. I would ask it again and again. Should I go to the trial and see the driver? Would that help me or would it harm me? Well, that was a no-brainer for me. I chose to stay away. But Trevor, my husband, decided to meet with the driver at a later time. Late at night, I'd find myself sometimes poring over old photos of Abby, getting more and more upset. I'd ask myself, really? Is this helping you or is it harming you? Put away the photos, go to bed for the night. Be kind to yourself. This question can be applied to so many different contexts. Is the way I'm thinking and acting helping or harming you in your bid to get that promotion, to pass that exam, to recover from a heart attack? So many different ways. I write a lot about resilience, and over the years, this one strategy has prompted more positive feedback than any other. I get scores of letters and emails and things from all over the place of people saying what a huge impact it's had on their lives. Whether it is forgiving family, ancient transgressions, arguments from Christmases past, or whether it is just trawling through social media, whether it is asking yourself whether you really need that extra glass of wine, asking yourself whether what you're doing, the way you're thinking, the way you're acting is helping or harming you, puts you back in the driver's seat. It gives you some control over your decision making. 3 strategies, pretty simple. They're readily available to us all, anytime, anywhere. They don't require rocket science. Resilience isn't some fixed trait. It's not elusive that some people have and some people don't. It actually requires very ordinary processes, just the willingness to give them a go. I think we all have moments in life where our life path splits and the journey we thought we were going down takes some terrible, veers off to some terrible direction that we never anticipated and we certainly didn't want. It happened to me. It was awful beyond imagining. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you think, there's no way I'm coming back from this, I urge you to lean into these strategies and think again. I won't pretend that thinking this way is easy, and it doesn't remove all the pain. But if I've learned anything over the last 5 years, it is that thinking this way really does help. More than anything, it has shown me that it is possible to live and grieve at the same time. And for that, I will be always grateful. Thank you.
Ooh, all right. Colleen, thank you for running that. We can switch back over to our PowerPoint presentation now. Oh, Claire, thank you for sharing that. Oh, That is wonderful. Yes. Hey, good. You were kind of naturally building on some resiliency without even maybe fully recognizing that was the direction you were heading in. Fantastic. It's wonderful when happy accidents like that happen, where you're like, oh, good, that seemed to make sense for us. I'm glad that it's actually backed by the research as well. So I find that TED Talk super powerful. I love how she starts. And I'd like you to kind of just circle back in your mind to those questions she asked. I know we were having a little technical difficulty in the beginning, but really she listed the big ones. You know, we're talking about traumas that we've experienced and how really universal those things are. If you'd like to look at this talk again, it's called 3 Secrets of Resilient People by Lucy Hone. I strongly encourage you to share that with others because, again, not only did she do the academic aspect of this, but man, she has walked the walk of putting those skills and that process together in her own life and has managed to emerge. All right, so on to our next slide. We know that Lucy really deeply understands pain. She knows this research. And I apologize for the minor foul language in that. I have it as bad stuff happens and instead of the phrase she used, but hers is effective as well. So when we think about those things like divorce, death, infertility, infidelity, mental illness, job loss, severe physical illness, these are the toughies. This is the stuff. And sometimes it feels like the world is against us and we're being punished for something and we don't understand why. But when we look around and when we start to share and expose those things, we really find out that this type of suffering is far more universal and that all of us have had really heavy burdens to bear. And the more we understand that this is kind of part of what life throws at us, and Colleen, we can move on to our next slide, we can start to trust ourselves that we can adapt to these kinds of challenges. We can allow ourselves to experience strong emotions, but also we can know that our emotions can't be the only thing that runs the show, because that can prevent you from functioning and from moving forward. It's okay to experience what we tend to classify as kind of negative emotions, like being angry or sad. They're reasonable. They're part of the human experience. But when we feel picked on by life, it really can be helpful to remember that we do not have a guarantee to be free from distress. And when we don't know what someone else has been through, sometimes it makes it so that we feel like maybe they have it easier. But just because we don't know their experience does not necessarily mean that they've had it easier. One way that we can make big emotions easier to deal with is to name them. That can make them easier to move through. This gives form to your feelings. Have you ever been really upset? You're feeling tons of different things and you're just carried away. You can't really think clearly. You just have so much stuff rushing through you, and it's kind of amorphous. It's kind of big and just blah, taking over everything. Sometimes if we can label that emotion or get specific that we are feeling multiple things, some of which may be even contrary to each other, that can help to bring form to those feelings and allow us to really feel like we have a better handle on acknowledging that and then figuring out how to move forward. Something that I've used with my children and myself is the feelings wheel. I picked mine up. It's an actual physical thing at the Recovery Box. And you can get this online. It costs about $8. They're really nice. It's just like a feelings wheel, and they will have, say, a main emotion like sad, and then that sad emotion will break off into 8 other different emotions. And from there, those emotions will break out into 4 other emotions. So you can really dig down into a deeper level of describing what your experience is and bringing some control and reflection over those emotions. You can also just go online and Google feelings list, and you will come up with tons of hits that are just free. Print them right off, set them on your desk, and then when you're feeling overwhelmed, go to that list and say, what is it exactly that I'm feeling? And how can I help name and define this so that I can understand it at a better level? The state of life is going to encompass the full spectrum of emotions. And so when we are able to get our hands around that, identify a feelings list. So you would just write, if you're going to Google that, say list of emotions or list of feelings, and that will bring up lots of different styles of organization of emotions. We find with kids, we go through like 5 top emotions, but the more specific we can be, the better it is for us to understand ourselves and where we're coming from. All right, so on to our next. Oh, this one is so right. On our next slide, recognize there isn't always a right choice. Like, how many times did we come up against this in the pandemic? Like, we think, oh, if I can just select the right path, I will get back to where I need to be. Example, if I were a better mom, I'd know if it was worth keeping my toddler in preschool while I'm working from home and I'm pregnant. Well, really, there's no good way out of those circumstances right now. We don't know what the best way is. We don't know what the right choice is, because really in this period, a lot of our choices have been pretty crummy. We've been going, well, which crummy choice do I have to pick from here? Because I don't like any of these options. None of them feel right. And none of them are going to give us back the control we wish we had. That is what this right choice really is, the illusion of control. If I can just pin these decisions down, I'm going to go in the direction I need to go in. But right now, all of the decisions are not necessarily in our court. And we've got to do the best with what we have available, what information we know, and where we stand, where we're oriented at that moment when we make them. So when you find yourself kind of fixating on being kind of right and making sure there's a right answer, you can say, there goes my mind again, telling me that there's a perfect answer. That's okay. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Drawing overt attention to your mind is going to cultivate psychological flexibility. That can give you the emotional space to question whether this line of thinking is productive for you or even realistic. Okay, and on to our next slide. This is talking about that outward focus. So, Cynthia, I think this is kind of also what you were talking about with your boys. Like, hey, what is good in the world? What did you find? How did you interact with the world today? What was good? We know that the work of Viktor Frankl, a prominent Viennese psychologist who was actually a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, he did a lot of observational work when he was there, and he noticed that the men who comforted others and who gave away their last piece of bread, they survived the longest. Those who offered proof that everything can be taken away from us except the ability to choose our attitude in a given set of circumstances, those men demonstrated resiliency by saying, I'm going to do the best I can for those around me and myself. Can you think of anything in the last couple years that has turned out positively? Can you think of any opportunities that presented themselves now? Anything you learned about yourself? Any places you grew that maybe you wouldn't have chosen, but now that you have come out on the other side, you're like, man, I am a better person because this happened. Not like you wanted to invite pain, but can you see the growth as the positive? For myself, I look back on that time when I decided to homeschool my children is probably one of my proudest parenting times. For me, that confirmed even though I didn't always do a good job every day, even though it was overwhelming, even though I cried a lot. I am deeply proud. Is there anything you all can share about what you've learned? Please drop that into the chat if you can think of any positive outcome whatsoever from this time that we've been experiencing these last couple of years. Anybody got anything else? I know it's a tough question because it feels yucky, right? You're like, no, this has been awful. Can you think of any ways that you have emerged as a better person? And I love that idea of emergence. It's like kind of like a butterfly concept, right? We've gone through change. We've gone through a new understanding of ourselves from caterpillar to butterfly. Camaraderie. Thank you for saying that. For feeling like you're in the same boat as other people. For recognizing others' humanity. And for making that something. Oh, yes, Colleen. It is. That goes back to our burnout discussion and how we're like, no, I'm cool. Everything's fine. I'm awesome. It's not always awesome. It's not always cool. And it is okay that it's not, because you know what? These experiences of pain are more universal than we know. And it is helpful to be reminded of that. All right, let's move on to strategy 2 in our next segment here. My favorite quote from this section is, don't lose what you have to what you have lost. I about dissolved into a puddle on the floor when I saw that the first time. Don't lose what you have to what you have lost. I think that's another t-shirt moment for me. So this is her strategy to look for the good, even though bad stuff happens to all of us. Again, building on Cynthia's idea of what she does with her kids. Let's go ahead and move to the next. Build opportunities for connection. So this social support and interaction can have such a positive effect when it comes to stress. It makes it easier for us to see good things if we create ways to share and support others. We're social creatures. We've got to get creative now a little bit more than we used to. But what we want to do is reestablish the overlap in each other's worlds. We want to signal to everybody, we're safe. I'm a safe person. This environment we're creating is safe. We can be ourselves here, and we've got room to hurt, and we've got room to grow, and we've got room to be at our best. Seek to connect, even if this isn't in person. Resist the urge to think people don't want to be with you and that their busy lives are just too full. They need you too. You reaching out to people opens a door for them. Make this intentional, deliberate, and ongoing. This connection that you have is important. All right, next slide. Share the aha moments. Exactly. And that's what that evening conversation can do too. There's so much that can bubble up in that gratitude time. Okay, create your fun times. It's pretty rare that somebody shows up at your doorstep with a cake and says, hey, I brought a party to you. Let's go. Let's have fun today. You've kind of got to make them happen. So take a glance down at your good things list again. If you don't have something that you just think is like a totally fun giggle fest, makes you happy, think of something you can add to that. Just, again, how many aspects of joy can you fold into your day? Because it is about you creating those times. Seeing them when they come along, but making them happen for yourself and others. Orient yourself to the good times. All right, and our next slide, share the good stuff. This really goes deep into the what good happened with your day. You have a message set up, Cynthia, that is ready to go for this. That's fantastic. Because what that does is maximizes the effect. You get to share in those feelings of gratitude. You get to share in pride at knowing that your children are making like friendly, healthy, happy social choices. You get to recognize and share with yourself and those people that you love to just really give a bonus to that gratitude. Do you have a term? I think she called it hunting for the good when they reference it with the Army. What is it that you call that, looking for what's going well, looking for the happy? I call it finding the happy. I look for finding the happy in the day. We can all choose whether we see it or not. So remember that you have permission to experience a full range of emotions, even when you're grieving, that your positivity can be contagious, and that you can show other people that it is okay to share when things aren't going okay, that it is okay to be exposed for not always having it perfect, because that helps other people be allowed to help you, and that helps them feel also like they are contributing to good in the world as well. All right, our next strategy is strategy number 3, and that is where she asked, we can go on to the next slide. You can actually go 2 slides. The big question, does it help me or does it harm me? We want to cut out the garbage. This touches back on our burnout session when we talked about getting rid of stuff that isn't top priority right now. It's okay to reorganize what gets your energy, and use this session as a jumping off point to say, I am going to restructure what I give my energy to so that I am certain that I'm giving it to what is most valuable to me. So what can you grow for yourself that helps to make you feel your best? One of the quotes on my work bulletin board is from a woman named Radha Sharma, and she says, what you focus on grows, what you think about expands, and what you dwell upon determines your destiny. Feed what is kind to you and grow yourself into a garden. All right, our next slide, we're getting back to that asking for help thing. We're not all good at this. That's okay. But if you're even considering it, reach out and ask. And if you felt like you've asked before, but you haven't gotten what you needed, ask again. And keep asking until you get what you need to feel the way that you know you want to feel. We have great resources available to anybody with our health insurance plan, and they are things that help you help yourself. So on to our next slide. This is where you can write down our information about our health insurance and how to get the help that you might be looking for as far as our EAP, that stands for Employee Assistance Program. This particular program will actually give you childcare options, elder care, pet care. They can help you with a concierge service to do home repairs. They are very extensive in what they offer, and it is very underutilized at the state. In addition to that, you get 4 free sessions with a counselor per issue. So you go to a counselor, you get some assistance with getting through something particularly difficult. You call this number back again and you say, hi, this is what I'd like to work on now. And they will issue you another bank of sessions. You can continue to use this service as long as you have new issues that you'd like to work on. And then if you get to a maintenance phase, then you work through your regular insurance provider. But reach out. You can do this telephonically. You can do it in person, however it works best for you. My children meet with their therapist on the phone. I am able to go into the office. I find it's more effective for me, but they love just being on the phone with him. So Don't feel like you're limited by your geographical area or the availability of therapists here. You can do telephonic counseling as well. So it's really accessible to almost anybody. All right, so on to our next to last slide. We are wrapping up. Where we are is hard. Burnout is something that is acute. It has to be addressed. Unless you address it, that energy imbalance continues. Resilience is a long-term skill, and you can get better at it. Into resiliency, bad stuff happens to all of us. It isn't personal. The universe is not out to get you. Even though it feels like bad stuff is happening all around us, we're going to try to hunt for the good. We're going to make our own happy happen. And then when we are struggling, we're going to assess our behavior. Is what I'm doing helping, or is what I'm doing harming? The more you can ask yourself that and be reflective, curious, and accurate, the happier you will be with your outcomes of your efforts. Put your energy into what grows you. All right, and so now on to our last slide and my gift to you. We were signed up from 10 to 12 today, but you guys were a lovely audience. We rapidly went through our material today, and my gift to you is a bonus 30 minutes of you time. No one expects you to do anything right now. You are supposed to be in a session, right? So you have the gift of 30 minutes now to tend to yourself. We've got full of ideas. Yes, I'd be glad to put that website back up. We are at a place, so hey, guess what? You've got time to call your EAP if you're thinking about reaching out. Boom, do it. It's actually not horrible outside. Let's go outside and take a walk. I think it's maybe 2 slides back. Go out and take a walk. Go put on some music right now. Watch a funny video. Go visit a friend. Give a friend who you've been missing a call. You can send me an email and say, Christy, I'm struggling. Help me. I need all that information. Do it. Now is your chance to pick an action that is for you and you alone. Take it, do it, love it. Snack on it for the rest of the day. Oh, Commonwealth website. Yep. That really, I'd love to put my email in the chat. Yes. Let's do that. Christina.Fischbach at dhrm.virginia.gov. Now you've got me. I also have a great booklet that goes along with this information. That is on issue. So let me pull that up really quickly for you. And if you're not interested in the booklet, have a wonderful day. Enjoy your free time. Do your best to be the best self for you. That is when you are at your finest. And it's hard to be at our finest right now, but the more energy you invest back into yourself, the closer you will come to feeling like you know what direction you want to go in and what direction you came from. I wish you guys all the best. I am having trouble getting that link, so give me one more second.
So I just want to thank Christina and everybody that is in the room today for being here today. I'm so happy that everyone has the time available to have these really great conversations. And thank you to the Staff Association for supporting this mini self-care program. And look for a survey probably tomorrow. So I'd love your feedback and see how we can do this again in new contexts or same context. So please reach out to me. or anybody in the staff association, and we will make it happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Colleen. I really appreciate having the time to spend with you all today. And I hope you found that you learned something that is going to help you get to where you'd like to be feeling how you want to feel. Thank you, thank you, thank you for spending your time with me. You know what? I'm going to have to probably find that other link later. Is that something that can go out with the survey maybe?
Yes, I'll send out the slide deck, the survey, and any information that you want to share. I'll just make sure it goes out to everybody.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That way I can stop frantically hitting the search box enough. Looking for it, so that'd be great. Take a little stress off my plate and give me some time to get that proper link for everybody. I hope you guys had a great time. Go out and do something fun and lovely, and give yourself a big hug while you're at it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.